Hey everyone, it is Wednesday, November 10th. The time is 10 minutes after 2 p.m. and the temperature right now is around 15 degrees Celsius. And I am here in the Midtown Toronto neighbourhood of Yonge Eglinton. There's a look towards the bus bays at Eglinton subway station. And just behind me is Duplex Crescent. Rather small street full of single-family detached dwellings. And this here is Duplex Avenue. And for this one, I'll be taking a walk around this neighborhood, which some have described as a condo hell. In fact, recently it's been featured in a couple of articles in the Toronto Star. One was titled, "I walked through condo hell on the weekend. Turns out it's not such a bad place to live." And then a few days later, another opinion piece dropped. And that had the headline, "Has the Yonge Eglinton neighborhood become a case study in how not to do urban intensification?" And that's what's prompted me to go out and take a walk around my neighborhood. And it's quite close to where I live. So this is a rather easy one for me to make. And here is Eglinton Avenue West. And there is a Toronto police station. And that is 53 Division. And as you can see, there's quite a mess of construction here in Eglinton. And I'd like to add, I'm not an expert in urban planning or development. So everything you hear in this video are just the opinions of a guy who likes to walk around the city. If you are into that sort of thing, there's some excellent YouTube channels out there, such as City Beautiful, Not Just Bikes. There's one called City Nerd. And there's one run by a couple of people in Ottawa called Oh, the Urbanity. And those people behind me just tried to walk down or walk along the south side of Eglinton here. And that sidewalk has been closed to pedestrian access for at least 4 years now. The last time I recall walking down there was 2017. And the reason for that is the Eglinton Crosstown LRT project that's going in. And since I'm here, it's worth noting that pretty much every building here on the north side of Eglinton has a development proposal sign up on it, including that one over there. So I would imagine in a decade or so from now, this will be lined with shiny new condos. So now it's east on the north side of Eglinton. And I just dropped off a package at this UPS store. It's an item I'm returning to Amazon. And I've lived in the neighborhood since about 2016. So I've been at my apartment for quite a while. And this crosstown LRT construction began back in 2011. Although the tunnel boring didn't start, I think, until 2013. And that's when the street really became a disaster. There's an entrance into the Yonge Eglinton Center. So as you can see, this stretch of Eglinton is not exactly a pleasant place to walk. They have completed the tunnels underneath and connected the tracks. The crosstown is slated to open at some point in 2022, although it's one of those I'll believe it when I see it kind of things. And here is the intersection of Yonge and Eglinton. And in recent years, this building got a bit of a makeover. The entire tower was supposed to be reclad and some stories added to the top, but that never came to be. There's a look up at the condos on the northeast corner of the intersection. And I think the last time this intersection was free and clear of construction was 2017. And even during the middle of a weekday afternoon, it's still a bit of a zoo. The lady just almost backed into me because she had nowhere else to go. And you could enter Eglinton subway station right there. And there used to be connections to that on the east side of Yonge, as well as the north side that led directly into the Yonge Eglinton Center, but those have been severed. There's a look north up Eglinton, or up Yonge Street. And maybe what I'll do is take a quick walk through the subway station, and we'll talk a bit about what that's like to use as a commuter. Got my mask on. So this is the 8th busiest subway station in the city of Toronto. When I used to work down in the financial district, I'd come here every morning at rush hour. And at the time it was over capacity. You would often not even get on the first or second or even third train sometimes that came into the station. And there used to be a link to the east side of Yonge just over there. And you could head down to the subway platform there. And in busy periods, this is always a bit of a mess because people often go around this corner and hug in on their left, right into people walking up the stairs on the right. They really could do with some arrows just to prevent it from being overcrowded. And even though the station's at overcapacity now, it's going to get a lot worse once the LRT opens. That line will essentially be funneling people from east and west to Eglinton Station, where they'll join the masses and head south down towards the financial district. There goes a southbound train. As you can see, it's not too busy right now. It is the middle of the afternoon. And there goes the northbound train. It's worth noting that I think traffic to the financial district, or at least the number of people working there, is down 77% from pre-pandemic times. And that's one of the concerns with all these new condos, is with the station at capacity and the impending LRT connection, along with a future expansion north of Line 1, north of Finch Station, things are only going to get worse here. So here's the bus bays. I actually started off recording this video just over there. That's Duplex Crescent. There's a look at the different routes at this station. I only ever find myself taking the bus here when I'm going out to record a video. Usually I just take the subway. And it's back out to Yonge Street. And to the south of here is the Yonge and Davisville neighborhood, which is also part of Midtown. Although Yonge and Eglinton, where we are now, is often considered to be the heart of Midtown. And there's a massive new development proposed in behind the subway station here, with buildings up to 70 stories. And there's a former movie theater, Canada Square. That closed down last month, actually. That's an 8-screen, kind of old school movie theater in that it doesn't have stadium-style seating. That opened up in 1985. I'm actually surprised it lasted so long, given that that same theater company has another theater just to the north of here. So again, that's south and towards Yonge and Davisville. And south of there is another major Midtown node at Yonge and St. Clair. And these are two of the condos that sort of kickstarted the current condo boom. Those are the Quantum buildings. They are 32 and 52 stories. They were originally supposed to be much taller, but the NIMBYs came out with their pitchforks, and the developer agreed to reduce the height, as well as invest $1.2 million into social housing and another $200,000 into transit connections. And just to set the record straight, I am not at all against building skyscrapers, especially around major intersections that feature subway connections. If anything, this is exactly the place these developments should be going in. But there's a few caveats. Namely being that the necessary infrastructure and amenities to support those developments need to be in place. And I'm not sure the city has done such a good job of assuring that here in Yonge and Eglinton. And in a little bit, I'll talk about what I think the real problem is with this particular neighborhood and many others in Toronto. In fact, most others that are currently going through a building boom. There's a Tim Hortons. And no doubt some very expensive lumber. And speaking of developments, I think this building here that houses CIBC is slated to be redeveloped. So in recent years, every corner of this intersection has seen construction. From the remodeling of the Yonge Eglinton Center over there, we've got the new LRT line going in. And there's the e-condos. There's a rental building behind that. And those were recently completed a few years back. So once all this clears up, I think this building will be on the chopping block just on the right. And now I'm walking east on the south side of Eglinton Avenue. And one thing that's impossible not to notice is east of Yonge, there is all kinds of new condo development. Particularly just off in that direction, just north of Eglinton, north of Eglinton.
Yeah.
And developments like that are far fewer on the west side of Yonge, and I'm not really sure why that is. There's a couple of new developments right on Yonge itself. And there's one at Duplex in Orchard View that's quite small. And a lot of businesses in this area have come and gone, like other parts of the city, but I start to feel that the neighborhood, or the character of this neighborhood, has changed quite a lot. Back in the 90s and 2000s, people often referred to Yonge and Eglinton as young and eligible. It was known as a bit of a party spot. There was numerous bars and restaurants and places to go out at night. And it was relatively affordable and had a lot of apartment stock. So it was a rather attractive place for the 20s and 30-somethings to come live. And there's still a fair bit to do here at night, but not as much. There used to be a bar on the other side of the street called Filthy McNasty's. That was next to one called Scruffy Murphy's. And one of the oldest operating pubs in the city, called the Unicorn, closed down recently. That's just to the east of here. I think that was about 4 years ago. It made way for, what else? A new condo. Speaking of which, here's another one. So if I ask myself, what makes a good neighborhood? To me, that's an area that's well served by public transit. Ideally subway or a frequent streetcar that has right-of-way access, which sadly the LRT even won't have above ground. It won't have signal priority, which is quite tragic. There needs to be access to public park and amenities. And over near where I started is Eglinton Park. That's actually one of the most used parks in the city. There's a real lack of large park space in this area. It of course has to be safe. And it has to be well served by retail and places to eat and drink. And I think this area does rather well in those regards, at least. I've got 3 supermarkets close by. There's the Metro near where I live, near the Yonge Eglinton Center. There's the Loblaws right beside me. There's also a new Farm Boy that I'll never shop at, but that's also within arm's reach, all walking distance. There's also 3 LCBOs, but sadly no beer stores. This here is Lillian Street. So I wouldn't exactly call it condo hell, although it's easy to see how this area gets that moniker. Used to be a Copacabana over there. Now it's a La Latina. Apparently that's the same owners. And this development here is particularly offensive. On a major street with no retail, not providing any sense of street life here. And coming up at Redpath, that's where the Unicorn used to be. And there was an 8-story office tower there that succumbed to developers. And straight ahead is Mount Pleasant, and that's where the next LRT stop will be. And now it's north on Redpath through a maze of new condo developments. And I talked about just now how horrible I think this building meets the street. And I think a lot of the issues would be resolved if we simply had better zoning laws in place. That type of development should not be allowed without proper street frontage. But one thing I haven't showed too well in this walk that I did at least at the very start on Duplex Crescent is that within a few minutes walking of Eglinton subway station, you have a lot of single-family detached homes. And that, to me at least, is what's really wrong with Yonge and Eglinton. Not that there's all that wrong with it. I choose to live here, but in terms of all the criticism towards all the condos and developments, you'll notice something. There's really not much in the way of middle density developments. Everything is low density. And because the homes are pretty protected against redevelopments, that kind of forces the developers to take whatever lots they can get, and then they try to maximize those developments by building as high and as many units as possible. And the city plays a hand in that, in allowing them to be mostly studios and 1-bedroom, some 2-bedroom, and there's very little in the way of 3-bedroom condos going in. And the ones we do have are often 3 very small bedrooms at a very large price. So you have all these tall towers, and then right next to them you have these single-family homes. And there's not much in the way of in-between. I think that's ultimately the real failure, is we could have achieved a much better scale in a neighborhood like this with more developments like this, actually. Stacked townhomes. I think the amount of condos and their heights wouldn't have to be so extreme. Or at least the city would have more of a leg to stand on to keep things more reasonable only they allowed more developments of this nature. And that's a problem that kind of plagues Toronto all over. Everywhere you have these monster condos going in. And they're surrounded by single-family homes. And there's almost nothing in between them going up. There's city lights on Broadway. And again, I do live here, and I choose to live here, and I have no plans on moving. So from the perspective of a 41-year-old guy who lives alone, this neighborhood does serve all my needs. Although if you're anything more than a couple, I think the long-term prospects of this neighborhood aren't good. There's nothing wrong with raising a family in a condo or apartment. But when everything is a studio or a one-bedroom, good luck with that. All right, I'm gonna go one more block to the north here. Hey, hey, hey! Are you kidding me? I got him on video. That guy was not looking. I'll have to go back and rewatch that to see if I did anything dumb, but I'm pretty sure I stood there, waited till it was clearly my turn to cross, and he just kind of brain dead went for it. Here's a little apartment hanging on with a monster development going in. So we are on the east side of Yonge. Like I said, this is where all the condo magic is happening. Well, it looks like there's some new developments planned to squeeze into that lot there. So this is very typical of what you'll see around apartment buildings in this area. And here's a sign from the Toronto Catholic School Board saying, if you move into this area, you may not have a spot at one of their schools. And the same goes with the Toronto Public School Board. Look at that giant tower they're going to cram right next to that apartment building. Here is Erskine Avenue. Here you have a lot of these larger apartment buildings. Thank you. I had a crossing guard to help me with this one. So these apartments are a lot of the reason why this area was so popular with 20s and 30-somethings back in the 90s and mid-2000s. There's an apartment up for redevelopment. So like a lot of areas in Toronto, it could be better, but I still think it's pretty great overall. I am concerned for the transit capacity of Eglinton Station getting overwhelmed. I think at some point the TTC will have to start inserting empty trains at rush hour in this area, just to deal with the added capacity. And would I raise a family here? If I had the funds to support it, I absolutely would. Really, most of the inconvenience is along Eglinton, where the crosstown's going in. But for me personally, I think I've been here long enough that I've grown numb to it. And this area was previously known as North Toronto. There's the John Fisher Public School. Just to the north of here, there's a street called Keewatin. That street is known for a NIMBY group that called themselves Density Creep, as the developer had planned to put in condo townhomes on the east end of the street towards Mount Pleasant. And their pitchforks came out. This area is rife with NIMBYs who pretty much oppose any and every development. And that group was mocked and ridiculed online, and rightfully so. They gave bogus reasons like the townhomes would lower their property values. And really, that's exactly the kind of development that kind of street should be seeing. I think to have a house in an area and assume that the neighborhood will stop changing and evolving just because it's the way you like now is a bit short-sighted. At one point, this area would have been the outskirts of the city, and it would have been mostly farmland. And it eventually became suburbs, and now it's a major node, one of the most major ones in the city. So why should it stop evolving now? I don't really understand that argument. Reminds me of all the people that moved into the entertainment district and condos near the clubs, and then complained about all the noise. Like, did you not research that before you moved in? And the city actually ended up responding by not offering new licenses to venue operators in that area. And it's back to Yonge Street. All right, let's go north for a block. Notice on the west of Yonge, there's not much in the way of high-rises poking out, which is weird, but as I mentioned, they're mostly on the east side.
She goes on.
Thank you. And this here is Castlefield. So we're just going to walk west a little bit. That parking lot's up for redevelopment. So here we are, steps from Yonge Street, steps from a major subway station, and we've got just regular housing like this. When in most cities in the world, or at least in Europe and Asia in my experience, well, in Asia these would all be high rises. I think in most European cities we'd be looking at mid-rise developments, given the proximity to the main street. But here in good old Midtown Toronto, we try to preserve things the way they are. So I think it's very unlikely, given the value of these homes, that we'll see any type of major redevelopment going on. I think commercial properties will be afforded no such protections. They will be demolished and replaced with tall condos wherever possible. And that's looking directly into the sun. I do have some friends that actually own homes in this area, and a few that are viewers of the channel. I'm not saying they should all be leveled. I do think that intensifying from Yonge Street out with mid-rise development is a good idea, along with bolstering the transit capacity. And making sure, of course, there's adequate school services in place. Like I said, I'm not a public planning expert. This is curious. You can live in this thing for millions of dollars, steps from a subway station. And here's a curious high-rise. This was built in the 70s. And it's really kind of out of place. I don't know the story behind that building or how it came to be, but it really would have stuck out like a sore thumb back then. I think this home is quite nice. So if you're looking for some type of radical opinion or hard stance, I don't really have one for you. I think it's a great neighborhood, but it could be a lot better. I think that's the case of most neighborhoods in the city. It's just this one's got a lot of attention lately. And like I said, I've kind of grown numb to all the construction. And if the Toronto Star wasn't behind a paywall, I'd link to those articles in the description. I think one of them I was able to read one of them. The other one I had to get a hold of through alternative means. There's where Sporting Life used to be. So I'm just gonna end this video in a second. I hope you enjoyed this walk through condo hell, as some would say, here at Yonge Eglinton in Midtown Toronto. If you wish to support the channel, there are links to my YouTube channel membership and Patreon in the description. I also have an Instagram account. And let me know your thoughts and comments down below. And I think the next time I come through this neighborhood, I'll have to make it a night walk. I also missed the main stretch of Yonge Street on this walk, although that really wasn't the point of this building, this video. Anywho, thank you for watching, and I will catch you on the next one.